go.
We're live.
Sorry, the music's just got a little bit of energy in there.
I
was thinking about dancing, but then I knew it would snap over. So
we have such an amazing music.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. So not your mama's Zero Trust, right? Not gonna lie, I had a hand in that title. I love it.
Truth or lie? Truth or lie? Yes, this is not going to be the standard Zero Trust talk or any standard talk by any means. For once, we don't have slides. Woohoo! No slides. Yes.
Nope. No slides.
No.
And you all, because I can't see you all, right? You can chat with us. You can ask questions. You can debate. You can agree. By the way, we're going to kind of pseudo have Team Justin, right? And then there's Ismael over there. And we're just going to talk through Zero Trust concepts, good, bad, the ugly. This is not a session to beat on Zero Trust at all. I think it's a really cool topic. We cover it in SEC530, Defensible Security Architecture and Engineering. There's a lot of good use cases for it, but I also think there's a lot of fluff, misconstrued language, vendor. I don't even know how to coin that without beating on vendors. Let's just say the vendors push Zero Trust a lot without actually, in my opinion, presenting a Zero Trust solution, because I don't think products are necessarily Zero Trust, definitely not turnkey at least. So we just want to talk through this and share our opinions, whether you agree with them or not, and you don't have to agree with them. And if you don't, throw it out there, and I will gladly ignore it, and you can be on Team Ismael.
Okay, so this is getting interesting. Maybe we should ask the audience, what do they think Zero Trust is, right? And maybe we should argue what Zero Trust, if Zero Trust even exists, right? Let's start with that. Is Zero Trust a true or truth or lie, right? Which side are you gonna take?
I can take the pessimistic side pretty good.
Oh man, not on this one.
Anti-Zero Trust, boom.
Because I'm gonna say that Zero Trust does not exist.
Oh, you can. That's my thing. That's
what I was saying. That we're gonna agree now in the very first minute. That sucks.
So what he's saying is Ismael's on Team Justin, so more votes to Team Justin, right?
No, I truly believe that there is no. So when we talk about security, there's no 100%. So if there is not 100% security, there can't be Zero Trust, right? So 0 or 100 cannot exist. Those are both extremes.
Yep.
And I like to think of security as not a binary or digital 0 or 1, all or nothing, but the in-betweens. Can you get close to that? I think so. So maybe that's my posture, right? There's no Zero Trust, but you can do least trust.
I think that's fair, because you're absolutely right. You can never truly achieve 100% Zero Trust, but I don't really think you can ever truly achieve 100% defense in depth either. So I think those aren't fair statements. So we'll take the side of I'm going to be on the antagonist of Zero Trust is a fad. It's something that'll die off in the next year or two. I don't actually think that, by the way. I think it'll be around, and I think it should stay around. But just for the fun and sake of conversation, I'm gonna play the antagonist here to pull points and how we view this to share it with us. I did see a comment come in.
Yeah, there are comments already. So Johnny Everything says it's a strategy. It's not a product. Yes, that is correct. That is correct. But you could think about this as a strategy that can be implemented in many different layers. Like, what's the first thing that you think of when you think about Zero Trust, Justin?
Yeah, are you asking me? First thing I think of Zero Trust, I immediately go to the mandates I read online, and I go to where they contradict themselves.
Okay.
Because in my mind, whether it's the really cool Zero Trust book, Forrester's definition, or there's a lot of different variations, but there's a common thread. Zero Trust. Therefore, you must log and inspect what? Everything.
Things.
With being in the SEC555 SIM with tactical analytics, you would think I would want to hear, hey, let's log everything, but I don't. That sounds like an absolute freaking nightmare. So right off the bat, I'm already like, no. Log and inspect things that matter, not everything. So there's one, right? And then we have what? Because you can have a compromise here, there, down here, up in the cloud, on an endpoint over here, you must authenticate and encrypt everything because someone could be machine in the middle of you and getting your traffic. But how do you log everything if you're encrypting everything? Because then I can't see things. Therefore, again, second contradiction. Again, point to Team Justice.
We know you're going to win today. Come on.
Oh, all right.
Let's establish it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no one's voting, so did you even put a Twitter poll out there? Or
I'm going to do it now. So I guess what you're asking right now is, what is more important for you? Is it visibility or zero trust? And then, we can talk about what zero trust means at different levels. Because, for example, I think
Rob's got another definition here, by the way. Rob's stating zero trust, don't trust, but verify. And I think that's much closer to the truth. Plus, it's a strategy, so I like that.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, I think we're implicitly talking about zero trust on the network because we're talking about encryption and all of that. But can you do zero trust? I don't know, inside of cloud workload? Can you do zero trust inside of at the operating system level?
Well, so there's the argument. Like I could argue, we put a poll or a comment out on LinkedIn and I think Twitter. Maybe it was just one of them, but basically saying, we could do like Windows domain isolation, which is IPsec everywhere. And so host to host is fully authenticated and encrypted. IPsec is pretty solid. It's complex, but it's solid. So then to your question, Ismael, which is more important, having that authentication and encryption, where at the endpoint, theoretically, I still have full visibility because it's decrypted at the endpoint, versus having something like Zeek on the network. And my vote was life isn't fair, Zeek all day. But that's because from my historical reference, if there's a huge push towards endpoint, like EDR, next gen antivirus, UEBA done at the endpoint itself. And I think those are fantastic technologies. I think they're way better than what we've had in the past, but I don't know how many of my clients, and I'm not talking like one or two, I'm talking like almost all of them. They don't have complete endpoint coverage. And those technologies don't cover everything like printers and scanners and appliances and all their one-off cloud or their shadow IT. And if you have 10,000 assets, I can almost guarantee you don't have that software on all 10,000 that you actually have control over, because it's hard to maintain assets. Where Zeek's not perfect either, but at least it's like as long as it can see the network via tap, a mirror, however you're doing it, it gets it's like a global visibility point. And you can do Zeek equivalents in cloud too. It doesn't work for laptops out in the field though either. So all of these have flaws. And my point is, I don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
I really want both Paul and Peter on my team. I want both.
And actually, that's what you can do. That's what you can do with zero trust, right? So I'm gonna now get a point on my side. With zero trust, we talk about adaptive trust, right? So there's no 0 or 1. It's like by default, we do not trust you, but at some point you have to trust a little bit, right? So that's why I say that zero trust does not really exist. It's less trust. But the key thing is you're going to continue watching. You're going to continue monitoring the behavior. And when you talk about monitoring behavior, now all of a sudden, all of these things that we have mentioned, they have to work together, right? Endpoint monitoring, network monitoring. You have to have analytics. So, hey, SIEM, anybody? Maybe SIEM is not legacy after all.
It's
right?
not. SIEM is still awesome.
UEBA, whatever type of acronym we want to throw in there. So I believe that zero trust must include all of these different elements in order to
Okay, all right. So counterpoint then.
Yes.
What I just heard is complexity, complexity, complexity. Because even those things like, let's just say, know thyself, know thy environment, see a machine, and now it's acting strange. One of the zero trust mandates that I think not a mandate, but one of the zero trust concepts that I truly believe in is that adaptive that you're talking about, that, hey, I saw it acting weird, so you've lost trust, you've lost potential access. It doesn't have to be that, but that's super complex. And most organizations are still, in my opinion, struggling with the basics. And quite honestly, I don't see vendors doing, like, there are now a whole bunch of vendors selling, we do CASB and EDR, and all of them are integrated in a life cycle. But I have yet to see one where that life cycle truly is, I'm not going to say good, I'm going to say mature. So then how can people implement what you're talking about when it's so complicated?
Artificial intelligence, my friend. You were waiting for this. You were waiting for this.
I wasn't. You got me.
No, you set me a trap, like in the beginning, saying that you were going to play the no, right? The team no, because you're winning. Yes, no, that's totally right.
Yes, I just, if I at the root, I guess my argument for or against, really against Zero Trust, is we have to give people a much more practical approach to it. It is a strategy. It is a good strategy. But all the stuff I'm seeing seems to be not snake oil, but it's oversimplified and not truly a good Zero Trust implementation. Like, you remember when it first came out, like, it was software-defined networks everywhere. And that can be used and that can help, but what are some things that people can actually afford? And like in class 530, we do this. We try to showcase how to implement Zero Trust with the stuff you already own. Because going out and buying new stuff is not always, like, unless you have a business outcome on why you're buying that, and Zero Trust should not be the outcome. Zero Trust should be applied to achieve other business outcomes. What can people actually, like Mr. Team Pro Zero Trust, what can people do that actually lets them implement that strategy and do verification in a not overly complex, cost-effective, labor-effective way? There, put you on the spot. Take that.
I know. And at the same time, I'm posting a poll on Twitter. How about that, right? And I'm going to answer your question as well.
Okay.
There you go. So, by the way, we have the poll on Twitter. Maybe we can copy the link here. Can we? Yeah. No, I cannot copy it here. But anyways, so if you follow us, right, about security mapper, you're going to see it. The SANS Cyber Defense account is going to be retweeting these posts as well. But I posted this. Let me just see what I wrote. Live Zero Trust poll with Security Mapper and SANS Defense. If you can choose only one, would you choose visibility or Zero Trust to encrypt and authenticate all traffic? So please vote. Let's see how,
Rob is saying Zero Trust is the holy grail, so.
Visibility all day long, or I don't care, just give me Zero Trust.
I feel like Rob is on your side. Rob, I have a problem here. Come on.
So what can people do? Well, first of all, is be realistic, and that's one of the things that we discuss in Security 530 as well. I think we are victims of this industry where there's a lot of noise, and obviously every vendor is claiming that we are the best at this, at that, and this solves all of your problems. And when you start realizing that there's no one single thing that will solve all of your problems, then you start looking at how can I improve, right? And to me, that's the goal with Zero Trust. It should not be Zero Trust. It should be doing less trust that you do today. So, for example, I'm doing VPNs, and I give a VPN client to my users, and they, connect to the VPN, and they're on the network, and they have access as if they were on the network, layer 3, layer 4, and they can connect to many of the services that probably they don't need. So attack surface reduction.
Are you talking segmentation, like network segmentation?
Not yet.
Okay.
But the idea is, okay, how can you do less trust? Yeah, you could do segmentation, but you could also apply Zero Trust network access. What's that? Zero Trust network access. Well, that seems to be the holy grail right now for a lot of people that's saying, oh, we don't need VPN anymore, right? I can just go and replace all of these with Zero Trust. Well, maybe not. Maybe what you want to do is to start with a proof of concept for some of your users and some of your applications, and think about implementing this Zero Trust network access for just some of them, and see if that works for you. Because that's not all. It's not the panacea either, right? Will that introduce additional latency? Will that introduce additional risks? Who's going to be the trust broker in all of this? Are you going to host it? Is it going to be somebody else's? So this is way more complicated than just like saying, oh, just, here's my money, take it. I'm going to buy zero trust. At the end of the day, you're buying, a technology or a service, and you need to figure out how well it suits your business. And I think that's what you were going back to, right?
Yeah, you should never buy something unless you have I don't know how many times we see the new shiny appliance. I mean, and that's a completely different discussion, but if you're buying something, you first should have the business objective and outcomes and the processes that will support that. And if technology is a required component, then you buy it and you integrate it. But we often do it in reverse, and that doesn't work too well. That's a completely different subject, so I don't want to go down that one. But like, one of the things that I hear in this discussion is along these lines is network segmentation, because I still see clients. I had a huge client recently. We did an audit with them, and I'm not like an auditor audit, but like a defensible architecture assessment. We'll call it that.
Okay.
And we looked at it. It's like, wow, you've got, top-notch EDR. In fact, we ran attacks, and it's like catching things and ransomware. It's like, good job. And we look at their internet access and cloud access. It's like, wow, that's locked down pretty good. But then we looked at internal to internal, and that also included laptops because they were connected through a VPN in this case. And it's like, once you're on the inside for this org, I can go everywhere. And I can tunnel. I don't even have to do anything like, I don't have to do DNS tunnel. I can just SMB and WMI. And so network segmentation is something organizations have struggled with forever. And I don't want to harp on that. What I do want to harp on is segmentation is not just about network.
Right.
Like, what about who can log into what? And I'm not talking about an access control. I'm literally saying my account, Jay Henderson, group member IT, are there machines in the environment that I don't need to be logging into that with that account?
So you're talking about identity segmentation.
Yes. And I feel like identity is, in many cases, the new perimeter. Like, the perimeter's not dead. I hate that saying. It's just shifted. And now we need to do the things we've historically done. We still need to do those things. But there's other things that take more priority than historically. Right. Like your identity. And, well, you have ADFS and SAML and you have the OConnect. You have all these different ways of using your credentials and your identity to cloud and on-prem. And so I think, like, for practical zero trust implementations, doing user-based conditions, whether that's at your next-gen firewall, hopefully at some type of identity access management broker, like, you can do some really cool off-the-wall things that are like, Justin has this level of access. Unless we think he's being weird, thus his risk is lowered. If it lowers to a certain point, okay, let's lower. And this kind of fluctuates throughout the day based on what I'm doing. Oh, you're on Facebook. Do you care? I mean, like, for my employees, I don't care. You're uploading a whole bunch of data outbound, whether that's from your laptop at home or from one of my servers. That's a little bit more sketchy. I'm not going to just like cut you off at the ankle, but that's a higher risk action. Therefore, things should change.
So you're essentially giving me points, right? I mean, as you're going on this, you're essentially describing what a zero trust solution is. That's actually a point in my favor. So please, can somebody add a point to my?
Well, I still want to be helpful. I still want to be helpful.
Yes. No. And again, I think what we're discussing is how can you do less trust. So let's talk about that scenario. Like, is there, because sometimes we think about zero trust as something you can do only in the cloud, and it's not just a cloud thing. You can definitely try to implement zero trust on-prem, and that's what we're talking about as well, right? Many of these solutions that we have, and here's another point, right? And I see this every single time I talk to many organizations. We're typically not doing the most of what we have. Like, if I tell you that you can do a lot of zero trust, let's say less trust again, with a next-gen firewall, with your switches by implementing private VLANs, right?
But
by using your
private
host.
VLANs block without detecting. So I'm going to argue that's not really zero trust. That's blocking an attack. But it'd be like if I have a bodyguard out my door protecting me, someone starts shooting at me, but I don't hear it. He saves my life, but he never tells me about it.
Well, but that's why you put ACLs with logging. So you
You
bring
can't,
that login.
you can't do that with private VLANs because if I have layer 2 to layer 2, you can't see it because you blocked it.
But that's why you have to do. Watch for this. Wait for it. Not defense in depth, but detection in depth, where you add
you're
sensors.
going to move it to the hosts.
You add sensors to every single layer, just like in the real world, right? I just don't want to have a sensor.
It can't be network sensors. And now you did a network change that now requires a host detection. Going back to it makes things more complicated.
Well, yes, and to be honest, if you want to have one single thing that will do everything for you, just wait for AI. It's happening, but not anytime.
I know, but we're tied, and so I'm trying to win another point.
Thank you. See, so 1 point for Ismael. There you go.
Yeah. Well, that was a while ago, so I had the first point.
Then it's detection in depth. I'm not the only one that have talked about this. Anton Giovanni can actually have talked about this as well. But the point is, it just makes sense, right? Think about physical security, and I think about this all the time because it's just sometimes we complicate ourselves too much in cybersecurity by not comparing what we do in other fields. And physical security, nobody would just leave a sensor on the front door, right? I mean, we know that attackers can break a window. They can. So what you're going to do, you're going to have sensors all over the place, right? In your hallway, you're going to have sensors close to the places where you want to protect your data, right? Or your physical assets are the most valuable. And all sorts of sensors, not just a motion sensor. You're going to have a heat sensor.
Are you stating with zero trust, though, that certain assets are more important than other? Because that to me sounds like you're allowing more trust at other levels that you care less about.
Well, yes, and that's important. And that's another typical failure that we see. Imagine, I see companies that they might be buying these technologies or these services, let's say zero trust as a service. And then they get all these users, all of them, and they give access to all the applications. And I see this over and over again. For example, with WAFs, somebody told me a few months ago, hey, my WAFs are very noisy. It's like, okay, what's your architecture? Show me. They have one WAF to protect 1,000 applications. So you're trying to, with the same rule set, to protect everything you have. Of course, it's going to be very noisy because you have not classified, you have not identified what you're trying to protect and classified accordingly.
But couldn't you use that same WAF and just tailor the rules once per service? Because then it might still be noisy, but it's a tailored control. Now the question is, did they have 1,000 sites and therefore they were trying to cover everything?
Yeah.
Or did they have 1,000 critical services and they were doing what's right by putting additional control via a WAF on that?
No, it was like 1,000 different applications. Maybe it was not 1,000. Maybe it was like 100. But it was like a large number of different servers with different applications.
So we hear stuff, and I say this in class, that zero trust is an evolution of data-centric security. But in some aspects, it is, but it also is not, because with data-centric security, I'll make statements like, a domain controller, a database with a terabyte of data is significantly more important than that workstation or kiosk over there. Mm-hmm. And therefore, my risk tolerance is different. But with zero trust, in a way, it basically says, I don't care, trust nothing, verify everything, which is counterintuitive to what we do in security, which is risk management.
True, which brings another point, but let me just see some of the comments.
I'm just earning points over here. Come on, people, I need some points.
SecHub. I think I know this guy.
For Justin. Just throwing it out there.
SecHub, I think I know this guy. Easy win here for zero trust. Next generation firewalls allow using identity to block everything as an application service at a granular level if you use them like that. And that is exactly the point I was going to mention, that if you want to go towards zero trust, you have to realize that probably the most difficult thing, come on, John, come on. He's going to win already. Like, we knew this.
I'm only 1 point ahead of you. I'm only 1 point ahead.
If you're going to do that, you have to be willing to put the effort into figuring out what should be allowed on your environment. Not what you want to block, which is easy, right? No, what should be allowed. And that's where most people struggle. That's going to be hard, right? It's not about sitting down and saying, okay, so this is malicious, let's block it. This is bad, no, let's block it. No, it's about how should my business operate? What should my flows look like? Who should we, talk to? Users that should be allowed. Applications, talking to applications.
And I'm thinking, like, if you go back to, like, what is the focus right now? Like, maybe you just got like an assessment from someone, a pen test, a red team, I don't care, and you're looking at that report and it says, let's just pick a topic. Oh, you allow too much free access to the network. Like, someone can walk up and just plug in even in high risk areas, because if you plug in that network, you have additional controls because of your access control list, right? Like, an IT subnet often has more access than marketing. Just throwing that out there. So if I, as an organization, were to read that, I'm exploring options to mitigate the risk associated with that, which could be what John put. I could start doing user-based tie-ins as well, because you already own a next-gen firewall that can do that. Maybe I'm looking at something like NAC, where I still want to keep the easy access controls by subnet. In fact, with NAC, I can make it when I wirelessly connect, my subnet follows me no matter where I'm at in the building, which I could argue actually simplifies controls, other than NAC is really hard to implement. But if we were to say zero trust, it's not about picking the controls. It's about making sure the controls are implemented with a zero trust mindset. Because zero trust doesn't actually exist. It's a strategy to how to effectively use things we've always had. New stuff and things we've ever had. Would you agree with that statement?
It's a philosophy, absolutely. And that's what I was going to before, right? It's a philosophy that you can implement at different layers. And that brings me into a comment. I think we missed this one from CD. I work in compliance. We work on trust with our InfoSec team. Trust our vendors are mature and trust that certifications are rigorous enough. Trying to think of how risk management can think zero trust. So exactly, it's about a philosophy. How can you think? What's the mindset?
Well, I'm going to go pessimistic here for a second.
I'll take the optimistic side.
No, it's fine. And I'm normally a very optimistic person. We're just doing this to make the conversation more lively. But like, one thing that I see tons of organizations do, and we talk about this when we talk cloud in 530, is things like vendor or risk management associated, like due diligence checks. Like, you're getting ready to partner with a software as a service vendor. Like my company, we do SIM as a service as a SaaS. You shouldn't just be like, hey, Justin, here's my business. That's not appropriate. You should be like, hey, do you take security seriously? Do you have things like multi-factor, and who can get access to my data, and is it within whatever countries you need to be in or not be in? And what about your workforce? Do you subcontracting? And that's one of the ways you say, Justin, I don't trust you. Fill out this due diligence. My pessimistic approach to this is, once security starts to become a compliance checkbox, like SOC 2, Type 1, Type 2, SSAE, like I can say, here's my data center, we have all these things. That doesn't mean that we actually do all of those things 100% all the time everywhere, because there have been multiple breaches in the last, every year, where they've had all these due diligence checklists that make them look like they're the best secure company ever. I mean, Equifax.
But I am PCI compliant.
Equifax had a vulnerability that was, 5 years old at the time, but they had one of the most top-notch looking due diligence sheets. And to be all fairness, asset management, it's hard, but you should, from a zero trust philosophy, you should go into your vendor partnerships with, I don't trust you, I want to, but let's work together to make this work, kind of like a marriage. Like it takes both sides, and try to build processes that require that partnership.
And I think that if you're looking, for example, at doing a POC with a zero trust network access, which again, it's just a subset, it's one particular implementation of this zero trust philosophy. I think this use case, it's an ideal one, right? You have an application and you want to just give access to that application, and only that application to these particular users, these particular vendors or partners, right? You want to put multi-factor authentication on it. You want to implement this concept that essentially implements things like what we discussed in 530, right? Port knocking, outbound connections, so you don't have to have that service exposed all the time, right? And try something like that. Essentially implementing this philosophy where by default I give you very little, and then you have to put obviously the monitoring controls on top of that. And DC there mentioned something, right? Detect, respond, action at fine-grained level. So you need to architect for response as well. Because once you detect, hopefully, that there is some anomalous behavior, what do you want to do? You want to shut that door, or you want to take some sort of a reaction to limit the impact of that action, of that potential suspicious behavior.
Which I think goes to DZ Bear's additional points down below, like risk assessments, like a due diligence sheet. It's a snapshot in time. It doesn't represent ongoing posture. You have to trust but verify, and this is where you're mentioning, like, it could be the vendor needs to integrate this way, but you're starting to layer in compensating controls on the off chance that vendor process breaks down.
Yeah.
And I think between what you both say, I think that makes sense.
Go ahead.
No, honestly, I think that's +1 to Ismael, personally.
It's another point for me, right?
Yeah.
Another idea that I think it's an implementation of zero trust as well is purple teaming exercises. I'm a big proponent of that. We actually, the first exercise we do in 530, it's essentially a tabletop purple teaming exercise where, okay, yes, you're saying that you have strong protection, strong detection, prove it, right? Change my mind.
Sure.
So now we're going to test it.
How many organizations do you think are actually ready for purple teaming? Because I see purple teaming as this new hotness, and I think it's fantastic. But kind of like Denise, where you're going here, how deep should we go when it comes to good detection? I already feel most organizations aren't even close to it. Because if you can't, like, if I flash up your network and I start asking questions about it, and you can't answer it, and I get it's a huge environment, but that means the detection's not there yet. It's not mature enough. Yeah. And if you go to purple team before you even have a base layer of blue team detection, I do think it makes you better off overall, but is that necessarily the right call?
Well, let me take that and
is it a maturity item, I guess is really what I'm asking. Should everybody jump into purple team, or do you have to get certain things in place first?
Let me say,
I don't know the answer.
I agree with you. Many organizations are not ready. First of all, because they don't have that culture, and even talk about like emulating threats and things like that. Sounds like scary to a lot of people.
That's a really good point.
They don't want to do it. But for example, I was working with suggesting this to an organization the other day that they just got a SIM right on the cloud. I'm not going to mention the vendor, and they're just like looking at bringing DNS analytics into this platform. And now, how do they prove the value of this? So here's a very simple thing. You don't have to hire a red teamer for this. Get DNS cat. We do a lab with that in class, right? Get DNS cat and do a simple simulation of what a DNS exfiltration will look like, or a command and control. Are you getting those logs into? Are you getting that visibility? Great. Do you get detection? Right, the analytics. Great. It doesn't have to be a fully fledged purple teaming exercise. It could be.
And that I like. And I don't know, SecHub, if that's where you're going in your comment, that the bar should be pretty low. I think we don't do a lot of validation. And I think if you're doing what Ismael just says and be like, hey, let's just run this and see, like, because sometimes I think we assume we can see things, or like, there's a lot of attacks that just happened recently, like the exchange. Like, you could find a proof of concept with permission, and maybe that's not a good example because that one's semi-dangerous. But there's some things you could run, like a phishing email, and then realize did I even see? Did I have any visibility points that could have helped me caught this? And in my mind, I guess the reason I would have said that was a maturity item is because historically companies have so, and I'm not trying to beat on companies. We are so busy with so many things that it makes sense, but we don't know what data matters. And I don't think you should jump straight to Purple Team to figure that out. But once you start getting some data that matters, whether you watched a webcast and you started doing that, then I think you can do testing, have fun, learn both sides of the equation, like DNS Cat, like you're mentioning. There are some low effort things, Red Canaries, Atomic Red. It's got a little bit of a learning curve, but I think it's fairly easy to do some of those tests.
Even APT simulator, right? There's simple batch script that you can run to do this. And sometimes, I mentioned this in class as well, terminology matters. So if we're talking about corporate environment, I wouldn't say Purple Teaming exercises. I would say something like, efficacy measuring. It's like, yes, give me that. Okay, so let me measure the efficacy of your security program, your security monitoring, your detections, your visibility. How do you do that? Oh, I'm going to run these tests. Great. Well, you're doing a Purple Teaming exercise.
And I love that too, because sometimes you have things that you could catch for the last 6 months, but due to a patch, it doesn't work anymore.
I'm still winning, right? I get more points. I can see my.
So my argument here is these are all extremely valid points, but what does it have to do with zero trust? It sounds like just good security best practices.
It does have to do with zero trust because, again, zero trust relies on detection maturity, having the visibility and the detection capabilities and the ability to react to that. So I guess that in other words, what we're saying is if you want to go towards less trust, start doing these things because that's going to set you on the right.
I feel like when it comes to zero trust, detection and analytics should be the founding stone of your zero trust, because without data, and I'm not talking like advanced stuff, I'm just talking about like standard logs, things like that, your endpoint, EDR, even if you just have antivirus, just looking at data helps you figure out where your weak spots are and your decision-making process. We often, when I see zero trust, it's going straight into the more complicated things like identity access management or software-defined networking. And I think it goes back to what we've been saying for years before zero trust was a thing. You really should be starting with the basics. Next-gen firewall user-based rules. We have had that capability for a very long time. We had that before it was next-gen firewalls. Like that was in UTMs and all those other names.
That's the cool thing now. Come on, you're not like
zero trust is the new cool thing, which is why I in many aspects I think it's a fad.
Because it's not even the latest thing, Justin. The latest thing is SASE, right? Secure Access Service Edge. Now let's talk about SASE because that's the thing you have to have. Justin, you don't have SASE, you're not cool.
So SASE, the edge. Why do we have to say the edge is everywhere?
And well, the only reason why I mentioned this is because I just want to tell people, right? They're gonna be reading more about SASE and how zero trust network access. Once again, this is a subset, right, of the zero trust philosophy or mindset. Is just part of that, along with, guess what? Secure web gateways, which is like a proxy. Isn't this a proxy? Just we call it differently.
It's always been a proxy.
It's always been a proxy. Actually, most of the trust brokers in zero trust, they're just proxies, reverse proxies. But that doesn't sound cool, so we gotta call them trust brokers.
Like I get requests to talk about zero trust, and I'm more open to do it with you because I think we are pretty brutally honest. But I feel like most of the zero trust talks that people want me in, they want me to not say certain things because it's not cool. And which is why in this topic, I do think it's a little bit easier for me to be a pessimist, because security should be something we can openly talk about without everybody being like, just quit harping on it, Justin. But I'm harping on it because we're pitching zero trust as products and professional services for things that we've always had and should always have been doing or should always have not been doing. Like buying shiny objects all the time that's not the right method.
Yeah.
It's never worked. Should you need best of breed technology sometimes? Yeah, absolutely. For everything? No. We just need to implement things well. Like we talk about things like Microsoft Dynamic Access Control, right? And
Yeah.
how many organizations implement that even though it's in the system for free?
Every class I teach, like 95% of the class, they don't know about DAC or about classification, file classification.
Yeah, file classification. You can do that for free with Windows servers, and there's equivalent in other technologies out there, but nobody does it. That's
Do not
just
agree, Dennis. I can agree. Don't agree with Justin. Don't agree.
Oh.
Yes. No. And if you think about microsegmentation, wow, sounds like amazing, right?
We've always had it.
Everybody has a firewall on the endpoint. How many organizations do enable the firewall in a corporate environment? The endpoint firewall.
I don't know about you, but when I teach about host-based firewalls, endpoint firewalls, because that sounds even better, the students like shrug or they're like, oh. So to me, I feel like the mindset of no trust, the thing I don't like about zero trust, and I'm playing for points here too, right? Zero trust, there's no such thing as zero trust. There's always at least input. Like we keep having to change the rules to make zero trust even possible because it's not possible. And we can't always verify and then trust. It's not always possible. And in security, I'm going back to my main point. It's all about risk management and applying a level of risk tolerance. Therefore, zero trust doesn't truly exist. Not best practices, good practices, foundational concepts, they've never changed. Segmentation via users, the identity, and the perimeter's not dead. Your laptops can be their own little island. You still have to secure them. And quite honestly, I'm being harsh here. Quit whining about it. We've had technologies to secure things out in the field, whether they're on the VPN or not, for many, many years.
Yeah, no,
it's harder, but we can do it.
To me, the main benefit of zero trust is just like, thinking like your mindset, like trying to change the culture of starting to think of, hey, what are the things that I must allow? And then by default, just block everything else. And how long it has taken us to do that change of mindset just in the perimeter firewall.
We've never.
I still talk to people that say, hey, tell me, why do I need to do egress outbound filtering, right? Egress filtering. Seriously, outbound default deny. We still have organizations that do not filter traffic outbound.
Yep. But all I'm hearing then is that the main benefit of zero trust is that we got leadership to want to kick off projects that let us do things we should have been doing already, under the guise that zero trust is actually a thing.
It's always been like that, right? Compliance, SIM. Hey, you have a SIM here because you have to be compliant. I'll take it.
That's different. You might actually have to be compliant, and you can be compliant where you can't be zero trust.
Correct. You can do less trust. Remember, it's about less trust. and the reality is that it's a journey, right? And if you look at how we structure the class for 530, we talk about zero trust in the last day. And many people come to class just to learn zero trust. And we tell them, it's like, wait for it. Because when they get to day 5 and they look at zero trust, is that now you realize this fundamental truth that, if nothing else, I hope you can remember this from this session. In order to be able to do zero trust, you need to be able to architect for visibility, for detection, for protection as well, and response. If you haven't architected for all of these different things, and that's not just technology, right? It is people, and it is the processes for that. You're not going to be successful at implementing any of this.
And the illusion of zero trust, that mindset that we've always had, but we've now dubbed with a cooler name, you now would be able to apply to everything we talked about throughout the week, which is why I like ending on that day, even though we're going to flat out say, hey, this doesn't actually exist, but they're good concepts to apply for. And given all the things we've just talked about, you're probably already in your head starting to think of how this applies to zero trust.
Right.
So I love it that it's brought a lot of attention to certain items that have been foundational stones of security, whether they're controls, processes, technologies. But to me, it really just it's just something renamed with a cooler name. Which is funny because it's not really an acronym, even though you hear like ZT or ZTA, and
Yeah.
I don't know. But the truth is, I was going to win this conversation no matter what because zero trust isn't real.
Well, I have a surprise for I was just like waiting to drop this so I could win. Why don't we just talk about open source solutions that the audience attendees can implement to learn more about zero trust? Right?
Sure.
Because either we can do that or go through a list of like 20 vendors that I have here that offer zero trust, not for free, that you can.
Geek, Suricata, Security Onion, Windows Event Forwarding, Packet Fence, Keycloak, ADF, and any next gen firewall like a TF-Sense, and
Right.
There's a lot of technologies you have access to that have extremely enterprise grade capabilities for free with open source that will take your time, but you can start to do all these type of things we're talking about. They are labor intensive, but the issue for zero trust is people and processes, not the technology.
Yep.
Hands down. Boom, mic drop.
But still, I'm gonna go down to some tools that you can use for like zero trust type of architectures. For example, I'm a big fan of reverse proxies with Nginx, and I've been using Guacamole recently, which is a great project. So if you haven't checked it out, check it out. Guacamole
or NoVNC, they're both really cool.
Yep, where you can just like publish a service over the web. Now, you can do this with SSH, for example, which is pretty cool. Not all the protocols will be supported, but Guacamole actually supports quite a few protocols for that. You can put,
SSH,
yeah,
RDP, X11. Is there anything else in there?
Oh, there's a bunch of those. So just like go to Guacamole project and you'll see multi-factor authentication, Google Auth.
Yeah, that's HTML5 though. So if you get that up and running at home, you can access terminal servers, Linux servers, all over a browser.
Yep.
Using multi-factor, and it's a bit complex to set up, but that's a great engagement, I think, for learning the fallacy that is zero trust.
It's a good. How about Keycloak? Can you tell me about this one? Just you're trying to hide it because you don't want to accept it. You don't want to admit it, but
I've admitted it. I called it what it is.
Show us Keycloak. What can you do with it?
So Keycloak, it's an open source identity and access management. So you could have like a lab Active Directory environment. You could do like Linux PAM. You could have a Windows ADFS server. You could do SAML, Open Connect, and I'm pretty sure Facebook, Twitter, and some of the common social media authentications are supported. And so now all of a sudden you can get authentication from any of these locations and start to put rules around them. Initially, people just use it as kind of like a single sign-on almost. But with the fallacy of zero trust, right, you could say stuff like, okay, if any of my users are doing X, or I see something that's riskier, you can actually have the Keycloak server start to change the level of identity access. And if you have like a next-gen firewall, even an open source one like pfSense, now you're doing some scripting. But this I think is one of the most powerful ways of learning this. Like in class, I showed where I had a Python script that would connect to a FortiGate firewall, just a cheap unit I got off the internet, like eBay, something like that. And I can change people's access or groups' access based on things I'm seeing in like an open source like Elasticstack or Security Onion, Zeek, Suricata. Like, oh, I see an alert for command and control. I haven't proven it is that, but let's start to change their level of access until I've finished investigating that. I wouldn't recommend shunning and things like that, but the fact that you can dynamically change access because you've come up with a condition that trust has lowered And you can do it the other way. Like you just did MFA. Trust is increased. Could be your trust was lowered, so I'm now going to prompt you for MFA. And you go back. Like, I love that because I don't think access should just be allowed to deny. I think there's a whole bunch of gray area, and this would allow you to do stuff like that.
And you just join my team and confirm that, yes, that you can do less trust.
that you can do dynamic identity access management. Yes, I did confirm that.
I see. Well, I can't believe it. We've been, doing this for 50 minutes. Thank you all for, all the comments. I just want to read the results of share the results of the poll. Visibility versus I don't care, give me zero trust. 75%, and we had 12 votes, chose visibility all day long. The rest, 25%, I don't care, give me zero trust. So
give me something that doesn't exist. So 25% of you have disillusioned minds. I'm having therapy sessions on Friday with my live YouTube streams.
Watch the banner. Yes.
I have miniature horse therapy. Like you can talk to them. Well, maybe don't do that because you'll need a different kind of therapy, but it happens. It's okay.
I'm ready for that, Justin. I'm ready for it. Seriously. Okay, so what do we do next? Should we ask the audience what they want us to cover in the next one?
Well, we have 9 minutes, so I would be curious what you would like to learn about, or if you have a question pertaining to this session. If you're saying I would like to learn this, that just means that Ismael and I will take that under review because we're going to be doing more of these. And most of them I won't be playing a pessimist, so I apologize for that, even though I won.
It's okay. We know that in, like deep in your heart.
It's not about winning, Ismael. It's not about winning.
It's about participating. You participated, Justin. It's fine.
And honestly, it's not about winning. We're just trying to make it more fun. And when you see both sides of the equation, I'm actually pro zero trust. I do think it's oversold, but any topic, whether it's cloud, IoT, to be honest, it might not be as cool, but a lot of those foundational principles that Ismael and I have been talking about, we'd totally be willing to go into that kind of stuff. Like to learn more about detection? I love that. We can absolutely, I think, crush that.
That's our favorite topic.
That is. So maybe the next one we'll do an all-around defender. My SIM ones tend to be more, no surprise about logging in a SIM, but maybe we cover detection from all bases. Whether that's endpoint prevention software, which actually is, even if it's like antivirus, you can do pretty good detection with some of that, like HIPS, if it's configured correctly. But there's a lot of options.
How about this? If we talk, because I see that there's a lot of confusion there, not much about the technology, but about, like, should you detect all things? For example, should you log all things in order to detect all things? And then what are the things you want to detect? How do you prioritize? I think I don't know what you guys think, but I think that's an important topic.
Yeah, I mean, we could even probably demo a little bit of things like MITRE detect, because that works no matter what technology you're using.
How about detecting things in the cloud? You
mean the same assets that are now in the cloud? How do you monitor Apache on-prem versus Apache in the cloud the same way you've always done it?
There is a new matrix on. I know where you're going. There's a new matrix on.
You're talking about the tenant.
There's a new matrix
on
Kubernetes.
Container environments and
on containers, Docker containers.
I love talking about containers. Kubernetes, Docker. That's a technology that has really been, what's the word for that? Where it's changed so rapidly that we've not caught up. I'm going blank. Come on, Ismael, help me out.
I'm not an native.
It's a disruptive technology. But in this case, I feel it actually has given us easier capabilities to do detection than the traditional approaches. And maybe we could probably touch on a little of all of that, or we could try to deep dive into a single area. What would be more beneficial? A more broad cover, kind of a little bit of everything, or a deep dive on a specific? Because I think everything we just talked about, we probably could actually summarize within one of these 1 hours, and then maybe from there we deep dive.
And since we need to close like in a minute, we could follow the conversation on Twitter as well. So you have our Twitter handles there.
Yeah,
Feel
I'm
free
going from this straight to another call, so I honestly won't be following the Twitter, but we could. Deep dive on a specific. Okay, well, Ismael and I we'll talk over and figure something out, and we'll go from there.
All right, perfect. Hey, look like we have a title as well. Can you measure the efficacy of your architecture? Look at that. Whew, we have even a social card.
All right, so that's what 3 weeks from now, and
May 21st.
Nice. So we're going to do that one in 3 weeks, and we will try to come up with something on detection that potentially will be more of a deep dive and maybe a series of deep dives.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It was great to be here with you again, Justin. We need to do this more often.
always a pleasure. So, all right, everybody.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.